Hi, namaste, and thank you for tuning in. After doing a couple of recent videos where you see me draw something like this in an extremely fast motion way, like a fast-forwarded or time-lapse kind of a way, I've had some requests for a tutorial video on how to do this style of abstract drawing. The first thing to keep in mind is that this is not just abstract. This is non-representational or free association, or some would call it non-objective abstract art. What that means is that we're not trying to represent something specific. We're not trying to show any particular thing. We're just putting lines on the paper. We're just making marks. Now, as you can see I'm doing, without planning anything in the composition, without deliberately trying to do anything, without pre-thought, without premeditation, I'm just putting marks on the paper. Some people say that this form of art was invented by Kandinsky in the early 1900s, when he coined the term non-objective. Prior to that, even the abstract sort of movements within art were mainly revolving around the abstraction of other things, objective. Like in Cubism, how Picasso would take a person's face or a person's image and distort that. Even the Impressionists, who some people considered to be abstract at the time, just made other things look a little bit more blurry. Non-objective abstract art is really something that allows the artist to just do what they do. So I'll just zoom in on that a little bit so you can see. None of this technically means anything. Now, if you want something more of a tutorial how to actually do this, I'll just put the paper aside a little bit and show a few examples. When it comes to a drawing like this one here that I did recently, a lot of people might look at it and think that it takes a lot of patience or a lot of thought or a lot of effort to keep thinking of something new. But when you just put marks on the paper without worrying about what those marks are, you'd be surprised by how quickly you can pass the time. Here, instead of doing those lines, I've done a little spiral. I highly recommend a spiral as a way to start an abstract drawing if you're not sure what to put down first, because it's really easy to build from. Now, when I say build from, what I mean is, in order to fill the page with small details or in order to expand your drawing, you'll need to start adding other things into the composition. What might you add to a spiral like this in order to expand the drawing? For example, where this line ends, you can put a semicircle and connect it back to the main spiral. Suddenly it's an enclosed shape, not something left open. To that you can add another circle and keep growing the form. Once you've done this, you can put something like an outline around the whole thing. If you put the line closer and farther away in different places, it adds a little bit of dimension to the picture. You don't have to fully outline the drawing, you can also close that in any place you choose. And you can also break the line off and add other small details to it. The thing about non-objective abstract art is that there's absolutely no rule to it. You can do anything you choose. For example, if you want to fill in these kind of globular shapes, you can't really call them circles, they're more like blobs. In one of them, you might choose to put something like this. Almost like a fan. In another, you might choose to keep tracing that same shape in on itself. And in another, you might want to put just a solid stripe. Now what do you do with this line here? You can put dots around it. They can go all the way around or they can go partly around. You can also mirror those dots on the other side. and increase their size as you reach the larger part of that sort of a shape. And then add some more lines wherever you want. Now at first, if you're not able to make a perfectly straight line, don't worry about that. The more you practice, obviously the better you'll become. Now maybe you can adorn these by putting something inside. I recommend taking a couple of pieces of paper and just getting experimental. See what kinds of different shapes you can make, see what kinds of different lines you can make. Find out the capacity of your pen. Some pens can make really fine little details, some are a little bit more bulky. With one pen you can make all kinds of different lines. For example, with a small shape like this, you can create something like an abstracted or a distorted mandala. The key in this case is to keep consistency. Add the same detailing to each part that extends. Now I always draw in black pen, and I avoid drawing first in pencil, or tracing, or using any kinds of tools like rulers or compasses. Not because I think that there's anything wrong with doing those things, but just because I prefer to have the hand of the artist visible in the final piece. I like things better when they don't look too perfect. Of course, as you experiment, you might prefer to do it differently, and that would be great. The key is to just start and have fun with what you're doing. So these are just a few examples of drawing starters. For many of these bases, you could expand and fill a whole page. The other thing is, if you've decided to experiment and have put a few different kinds of marks on a page the way I've done here, you can still continue those into a larger composition by creating lines that somehow extend from one drawing into the other and connecting those little experiments. And you can fill a whole page into a composition just by doing that. This obviously isn't as detailed as some of my other drawings, like the one I showed you in the beginning of the video. But from this base you can create any style of art, any style of abstract art. The key is to just start doing it. Now, another form of abstract art that I like to practice is just making any kind of interconnected fuzzy line. This is an absolute favorite for a lot of beginners. When I say a fuzzy line, what I mean is instead of drawing something straight like this, or curved, or dotted, you draw a line by basically coloring, but in a controlled way, without letting the pen leave the page. You make a fuzzy mark. Maybe I'll zoom in so you can see that a little bit more clearly. When it comes to making interconnected fuzzy lines, you basically make any shape that you like out of a fuzzy line like that. And if you make it wider every time you're going into a curve, and narrower every time you're going down, almost like a graphing machine, it can wind up looking really cool. So, whoops, that's my line here. Interconnected means you draw the lines as close together as possible, almost like they're puzzle pieces fitting together. As you could see, whenever the paper was tilted or shifted, the direction of the lines changed, and it really changed the whole dynamic of the drawing. Another way that you can start an abstract drawing or fill a whole page is by creating for yourself a dot grid. The best way to make a dot grid for yourself is to take graph paper and put a circle, put a dot everywhere where one of the squares joins itself. But even by drawing your own dot grid like this one here, which is really imperfect, but even still it will serve our purpose, you can make something like your own dot to dot. It's more fun than a dot to dot, of course, because nobody is telling you which dots to connect or in which way to connect them. If you just make the goal to connect every line or every dot to every kind of a line, and then to make a shape out of it, you wind up with something like this. Now you'll notice these two are not connected to anything else. There's where you can have fun by tracing around this drawing. Now again, what do you do with the open-ended line? You can just keep going with it and see what happens. Another fun style for this kind of non-objective abstract art is to draw on a dot matrix grid. Not so much in a way that you're trying to interconnect one single line, but just playing with the grid pattern. So I go over some of the steps for doing this in this book, Awaken Your Creative Consciousness, and I also show different kinds of drawing on grids. So even right now, one of the pages within this book, I give a couple of templates for grid drawing, this kind of triangle grid. On one of those I show an example, this kind of triangular abstract composition. Next to that I'll show you how to do something like this. So you can see that's this kind of diamond shape or triangle shaped grid. You just pick the triangles you want to work with and start playing. Don't worry about being too perfect. Oops. Sorry, that's what I had done. I'll just show again what I did here. Just pick the triangles you want to work with and start playing by darkening them. Then since it's a grid pattern, you can get a little mathematic. You can count your triangles. You can also get really nicely symmetrical. The real key is to just have fun with what you're doing. When you're drawing with graph paper, you can fill the whole page or you can stop with just a few of the marks and really enjoy it. This is the example given in that book. And the same can be done, not just on triangle grids, but on regular kinds of grids also. Oops, I'll zoom out a little so you can see. Like these shapes here. It's easy enough to do. Once it's done, what Zentanglers or people who do tangle art enjoy is filling each one of these spaces where the line has closed in on itself with a different kind of pattern or design. So one might be with lines, one space could be filled in with dots, one could be filled in like a basket weave. That's not really a basket weave, it's more like a descending staircase. One could be a spiral. The key is to just fill the whole thing in with different kind of patterning. So this is a really basic, very simplistic version of a tangle drawing, but some artists get really extreme in the way that they do these kinds of tangles and the way that they fill the negative space or the overlapped space. What makes a Zentangle different from a typical tangle drawing is that the artist is starting with a square shape or an enclosed form. And instead of doing just a typical tangle drawing, they'll do some overlapping shapes or an overlapping tangle to fill that space. Once they've done an outline like this, the same way a tangle drawing would be filled in, they'll fill it in with different patterns. Now this doesn't really look like much, but as you practice this kind of a Zentangling, and there are tons of books, tons of YouTube tutorials about it, if that's the style of art you choose, you can become really, really good at it. Now, because this was a video for absolute total beginners, I highly recommend this book that I've made, which is called Awaken Your Creative Consciousness. Try to get a good shot of that. The Ultimate Guide to Spontaneous Art. Within this book, I've covered all kinds of different techniques for making spontaneous art. I've shown the step-by-steps, for example, of this image that's in one of my videos called Growth of an Abstract Drawing, and broke it down into really easy to follow steps so that you can do it yourself. I've also covered grid drawings, like these ones here, and included plenty of templates so that you can do something like this for yourself. A lot of techniques that I haven't covered in this video. Different patterns for tangle style drawings and a grid where you can make your own. Tons of paper to practice on in different kinds, and even some dot matrix paper. So maybe I'll put a link to where you can see a flip through of this entire book. But in the meantime, if there's any other style of abstract art you'd like to learn how to do, stay tuned, I'll cover some more, including watercolor painting, like the ones I'm working on now. This one here, and this one here. So thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos. Nityanandam.